Our next speaker's goal is to help you understand the convergence of learning, tech, games, and game thinking with analysis, research, laughter, and insight. He understands that learner engagement in the time of virtual session fatigue can be difficult, but he knows there are ways to make it engaging, interactive, and dare we say fun. Known internationally for his work on gamification, games, and game thinking, he is a professor of instructional technology at Bloomsburg University. He is a TEDx speaker, author, and a LinkedIn learning teacher, Mr. Karl Kapp.
Hi, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining. I'm very excited to be here, very excited to have everybody on this presentation. And I'm especially excited about this presentation because I'm going behind the scenes. I'm going to go backstage and kind of show you what I do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the typical presentation that I do just to give everybody a sense of what it is in case you haven't seen that presentation before. And then we're going to deconstruct the presentation and talk about how you can construct the presentation. So really excited about that. So we're going to do what I call the design takeaway challenge. So you've got two challenges. Maybe take out a piece of paper. One is usually when I do this is to learn about the topic of gamification, and this one's kind of abbreviated. And the other one, which is still valuable for today, is we're going to think about what design decisions did Karl make in this presentation? What design decisions could I take from that and put into my presentation? So think of it, I usually talk about two hats. One today we're not going to wear as much, but the one we're going to actually wear more. So I think that kind of works out. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a presentation called The Case of the Disengaged Learner. And we're going to talk about how we can engage learners. So let's jump into this case. So it started out like any other day. And then I had ventured out on my lunch break when she showed up, like a boss who had a problem that needed to be solved. Okay, like a boss who had a problem that needed to be solved. Hiya, boss. Hey, I have a problem that needs to be solved. On my lunch break, learners are disengaged all over. I need to know why and how to fix it. I started to imagine the chaos, the agony, the snoring. Then the boss zoomed off into the cityscape. We've got to solve this mystery and solve it fast. Help me figure out the clues before it's too late. Now, this is where you come in. I want you to open another browser window and go ahead to pollev.com/Karl Kapp. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Go ahead and do pollev.com/Karl Kapp. Just open another browser window. Don't do anything in the browser window yet. Just open it up, and we're going to go ahead and get started. This actually, as we go behind the scenes a little bit, this is really one of the most important parts of the presentation, is getting the learners into their browser window. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. pollev.com/Karl Kapp. When you get in there, it might ask you to enter your name. You don't need to enter your name. You can just click by that, not worry about entering your name at all. And just we'll start with the first question. So hopefully everyone is in and ready to go there. All right, awesome. So let's go. So the first question I'm going to ask you is to choose your disguise. So what disguise do you want to be? Red, blue, green, orange? I'm going to head and unlock the poll, and I want you to choose which disguise do you want. Okay, everybody's in on blue. I just want you to know that red won last time. So as soon as I say that, somebody jumps in, but that's okay. So we've got lots of blue people, a few red, some orange is there. This is surprising. Red is usually one of the more favorite colors. So this is really interesting. Okay, so we're going to use this question to answer all of our other questions. Let's go ahead and jump in. So the stakes are high and time is very short. The idea of disengagement was spreading. Disengaged learners are everywhere. Learners are suffering from Zoom fatigue. Green aliens from Mars land nearby. Are you There's always one newspaper, isn't there, that prints some crazy, wild story. Although these days in the US, it's harder to figure out what's a wild story and what's not. But let's get back to learners are not engaged. Why? We need to find some clues and we need to find them fast. First stop is the learner's office. Do you see a clue? So if you see a clue, go ahead and you can maybe type in the chat if you see a clue, or go ahead and think to yourselves, what could be a clue? Let's look around. We've got a pile of papers. We've got this picture frame. We've got this book. We've got this Post-it note. So what do you think the clue might be? Actually, no, it's not the book. That's just obnoxious product placement. It's actually the Post-it note. So let's see what that Post-it note says. It says, does engaging learning start with action or does it start with content? Let's go ahead and take a look. So do you think it starts with action or do you think it starts with content? Go ahead and answer which you think. Okay, red is all in on action. Orange is all in on content. Oh, green is kind of some action, some content. Red and blue is still 100% action. Very interesting. Oh, somebody on blue defected, or somebody answered late. Nah, maybe it's not content. Red is still all in on action. So let's go ahead and see what the right answer is. So actually it's action. We know that learners learn best when they do action. Action's the right answer. Let's take a look why. So there was a meta-analysis of 225 studies. The meta-analysis is a study of studies. And they looked at STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and found that with undergraduate courses, active learning increased examination scores by 6%. And if you're in a lecture-only class, you're 1.5 times more likely to fail. So action and activity works well. There's lots of different things you can do for active learning. And for example, good game designers know that games are engaging because they require action right away. We need to require action right away of our learners. Action draws in players and it can draw in learners. So start with action. Look, I found some things written on a notebook. For learner engagement, active learning, decision-making, storytelling, find Ivan. Could be a lead in this case, or it could be this session's learning objectives, action learning, decision-making, storytelling. I think what is active learning? We need to find Ivan the informant. I knew one of Ivan's old haunts. He was about as friendly as a clown with no rubber nose. Hello, Clueless. Hello, Clueless. Look, I'm going to ask you a question about engagement. Let's see if you know the answer. You discovered that student lounge, that active learning is effective. You discovered in the student lounge that actual learning is effective. But what do students themselves think about active learning? When faculty use active learning technologies, do students feel like they learn more, less, or about the same? And I'll put this here. Do they know more, less, or about the same? What do you think? Let's check it out. More, less, or about the same. Whoops. Show responses. Okay. Red's 50-50. Blue's 100% more. Actually, it's really interesting. Students, red and green, you're correct. Students believe that they learn less with active learning. In fact, researchers found students in active learning feel that they learn more. And one of the researchers actually said the students' feeling of learning and the students' actual learning are negatively correlated, which means the more they think they're learning, the less they are learning. And the more they're learning, the less they think they're learning. And they believe because with active learning, there's a lot of cognitive load, there's some struggle, there's some confusion, and we don't like that. We like everything to be easy and simple and quick, so there comes some problems with that. But what we really want is this thing called desirable difficulty, which is about adding obstacles and methodologies to actually make the intake of learning slower so that the retention is higher. It's really fascinating area of study. So let's brief the boss on what we've learned so far. Well, she didn't seem bothered for some reason by the fact that she was breaking our company's no smoking policy. Very interesting. So what do we have? What do you think, detective? Okay, so here's where we could write some answers. So this is actually an opportunity where I often ask learners to reflect on what they've learned. So people say, storytelling, desirable, difficulty, which has always helped, action first. So this is a method, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that you can actually add some level of reflection into the presentation. But let's carry on. So in this particular case, this is the end. Otherwise, the story would keep going. But I wanted to introduce this in a manner that kind of explained what I try to do with my presentations, which is add an interactive story. Now, you may say to yourself, well, Karl, that's all well and good. That was kind of cute, but we don't deal with that kind of stuff. But let me stop here before I go into another avenue and ask, are there any questions so far? So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. Let me know if there are questions, or give me the sign to go ahead and continue.
Nothing has come through yet, Karl, but I will let you know.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so what can we do? Well, one question that I get a lot, so I kind of anticipated this question, was how do you actually take notes directly in PowerPoint? Like, how is that done? So I'm going to go over that just very briefly, but I also have a link here to show you how to do that as well. So here is my PowerPoint slide. And one of the things that you can see in the PowerPoint slide is I have this thing called Developer tab. And the Developer tab is actually very, very useful. Now, you may not have a Developer tab, so there's actually a way that you can go into PowerPoint, into the ribbons, and add the Developer tab to your ribbon. And again, I explain that in these instructions. I'm not going to go in there. But once you get in, what would you like to do with the Developer tab? So I'm going to show you really quickly how you can do that. So I'm going to just add a new slide, and I'm just going to make that a blank slide. And I'm going to go into developer, and then developer gives you all these really kind of nice, nifty little tools. And one of them is this ABC tool. And if you mouse over it, it says text box active X. So I can click on that, come into my slide, and actually create that text box. And that text box now is something I can actually write in. So if I go here and go here, and where did I add that? Whoops, sorry. Here, that particular slide here is, and I can type in that box. And I don't have to exit PowerPoint to be able to type in the box. Now, some really interesting things about this, which I think is interesting. Notice here, when I'm actually in PowerPoint, I can't get into that box. The only way I can type into that box, and sometimes if you double click, you get into this area. But if you type in there, I can't type in. The only way I can remove data or information is come into here and then go ahead and do that. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing that you'll want to know is that there are certain attributes or properties that you'll want to set. So you click on the properties key here, and now I've got all kinds of information. For example, the border color. If I don't like black as my border cover, I can go to a palette and I can change my border to red or some other color. I can also, if I want, I can even have this with scroll bars or without scroll bars. I can actually change the background color. You remember we saw one of them was yellow. We can make it yellow like a notepad. You can change the font. You can change whether or not you can have multiple lines. I always say yes, so you can do multiple lines. So there's a lot of different things that you can do just to set up the ability for you to be able to take notes right on PowerPoint. And when that works really well is, let's say that you're doing a presentation in Zoom or something, and you want to take notes in PowerPoint from the chat, but you don't want to break into the back of PowerPoint and then break back into PowerPoint and go from there. So just simply being able to do that can be really kind of helpful. So now I have this box. If I go back into PowerPoint, I can type and do all kinds of stuff. But there's also an enter line. So it's really helpful. So if you have a chance, try that out. Remember, you have to have the developer tab. But again, I've got the link in there that you can find that. So let's talk about some other things. Oh, here's the link that you can go ahead and find that. So what are some other applications? So let's say that you're like, yeah, Carl, I don't know about this detective thing. It didn't really work for me. It wasn't really good. But so here's another example of how you could use this maybe in a more of a corporate or academic setting. So there are CDC guidelines for conducting a field investigation when you think there might be an outbreak. This could have been used several months ago, but we have these 10 elements. So rather than me as a presenter going down through all 10 elements, wouldn't it be better to put the learner in the position of having to decide what those steps are and whether or not to take the steps? So here we have the similar office, but now you're working for the CDC and you're stationed in northern Pennsylvania or northern China or somewhere, and there's been or northern Africa, and there's been a sudden increase in the flu. You need to investigate. So first thing you do is you choose a team to investigate. So remember how we chose detective? Here you just choose a team. Then your boss asks you how you're going to start the investigation. Do you want to talk to the local health administrator, or do you want to go visit a doctor? And now you can decide. And so just like we decided before with the poll everywhere, we can go ahead and decide, hey, we want to go visit the doctor. The boss says, yes, that's the right thing to do. Go talk to the doctor. And then boom, you're in the office with the doctor. And now you're having a conversation with the doctor about this mysterious flu. The doctor says, we should go to my office, not really here where there's patients. And then again, what do you want to ask the doctor? So now that we have those 10 steps and that we're going through, we can actually talk to the doctor and talk to all that information there right through the presentation and have it be very kind of serious and very corporate. So this gives you that sense that, oh yeah, we can do some of that information. And how, if you notice how I put the stories together, and I encourage you to do this as well. So you have the setting and you kind of open with the story. That's the action to get the learner's attention, to draw them into the story. And then you have them join a team, because it's really interesting. I've tried this several times, and I've done presentations where you as the individual learner just answer questions. So what should the decision be? Should it be this or should it be that? You answer it. There's no competition. The moment I add competition, it just changes the energy in the room. It just, people like to compete. Not everybody and not all the time, but this is very low stakes competition. It's very non-threatening. I don't capture anybody's name or anything like that. But the instant you make it competitive, one team against another, and who's going to win, it suddenly becomes more interesting to the learners. So now they answer these 2 questions, they go through the process. I set up the story. We do a couple decisions right away. And now that she asked the doctor about what do you want to say to the doctor, then there's some time for me to give some instruction to the students and to the learners. And because we did this, for example, in live, you saw it work live, I could actually decide, oh, you know what? The learners already know this. I'm going to skip it. Or, they seem to be having trouble. Most people answered this incorrectly. Let me spend more time in it. So using the polling software allows me to get immediate feedback from the learners via Zoom or whatever, and then I can modify my presentation based on that immediate feedback. So here, for example, she says, well, have you administered the National Hypothesis Generating Questionnaire, which is an actual real thing, to any patients? He says, no, I'm not familiar with it. And now this is a learning opportunity. So what I try to do with these interactive stories is weave the learning opportunities into the story itself. So one of the characters typically is knowledgeable and provides content, and one of the characters is typically the foil who asks questions, or who is not certain of the information, or things like that. So it actually works really well because you have one person giving the information and one person asking the questions, just like they were the learners. So that's something to keep in mind as you decide to craft the story. So, thank you very much, and that kind of stuff. So some other questions I get, and again, if there's any questions, let me know. But other questions that I often get are, where can I get characters? People say that's all great and well and good, but where do I get characters? So there's a couple different places to get characters. So these characters that I have here were actually drawn by a colleague. So I'll bet you that there are people in your organization who have artistic skills. And notice these aren't 100% hyper realistic characters, and they don't have to be. Um, Depending on your organization, you can make them super realistic, or more less realistic, right? Higher, lower fidelity. There's some research that says it doesn't really matter how realistic or how unrealistic characters are. That doesn't really impact the learning for something along these lines. But another thing that you can do is, let's say that you can't find anybody that can draw, you're not sure about drawing. You can use, this is Beyond. You can use anything, Toonly, Powtoons, any kind of software that has explainer video characters in it, and Storyline's got characters, Captivate's characters, stock photo characters. You can grab the characters. I like using an explainer video software, and what I do, I literally just copied the screen capture and pasted it into PowerPoint. But I like it because a lot of those tools allow you to pose characters and allow characters to have different expressions. So you can add that. Beyond, for example, has these kind of characters. It has these kind of characters, and it has these kind of characters. So one product has 3 sets of characters. Again, Powtoons, Toonly, lots of other ones. There's a couple free ones out there. You can use those as your characters as well, and that will allow you to have variety in kind of the instruction that you create. And then you can add those PowerPoint elements that I talked about. So a couple places to look for characters are, one, look for any kind of online software to develop that already has characters in it, and look for maybe explainer videos, or look for somebody in your organization that's an artist and have them draw some characters, and just copy them and bring them into your PowerPoint. Now, another interesting thing that I want to talk about in terms of characters and narratives and things like that is, notice that I set the background here. So this is a background of a doctor's office, or rough background of a doctor's office. But once I establish, okay, we're in a medical facility, this is a doctor, then the next screen, there's no background, right? I've already set the frame in the learner's mind. So I don't have to have a set for every place. I can use kind of empty space because I've already framed it. So don't feel that you have to draw every single frame and every single background. You don't have to. So I think that's something else to keep in mind. I get asked that question a bunch of times. So how's the technology work? So people ask about that. The key to using, I happen to use Poll Everywhere, but there's a bunch of software. Like there's Umu to do it. There's Turning Point to do it. If you want a little more fun or game built in, there's Kahoot. So there's lots of different technology, but the key for any technology is to use segmentation, and they almost all have segmentation. So basically, segmentation is, I use Poll Everywhere, and I go into Poll Everywhere and I create a poll. And so I can actually go ahead and show you that Poll Everywhere live in real time, right? So that's kind of cool. And I can go to my polls. And so here I have a list of all of my polls, and I am doing the detective game. and I choose your disguise detective, and it goes right in here and shows me my poll. Now, the nice thing about this is with Poll Everywhere and some of the other ones is I can download this. As you saw, as we went through the presentation, I didn't have to leave PowerPoint. I did it right in PowerPoint. But the very first question is the most critical question. You want to make that question be the segmentation question. So in Poll Everywhere, and again, you can look in any software, I go into visual settings and I go down to where it says segment responses. Now, the first question I don't segment, but the next question I did. So this one's not yet enabled. But if I go to the next question and I do the same thing, you're going to see that if I go, it's enabled. So it asks me to disable it, but it's actually enabled. And then it asks me which poll. And in Poll Everywhere, a poll is simply a question. All of them do it a little bit differently, but it's a question. So basically, it's asking me to select the question that you want to use for segmentation. And so I always pick the first question. What team do you want to be on? Then every other question, we see what the team has answered. So that gives us a really nice way to do that. We also have the ability to view reports. So you can go into a segmentation report, and I can actually see, for example, how each team has done. Choose your disguise is the question. So I come down here and say, choose your disguise. I generate the report. And it shows me here, red team. So if you're on the red team, congratulate yourself. You were correct. You won the game. But basically, this lets me see each team keeps track of the responses over time, all that kind of stuff. So I can see who does what. So it's a really nice feature of that particular software. So, and then one other thing I'll show you is if you are actually in PowerPoint, you can choose Poll Everywhere here and actually new, and you can just insert a question right here. They call it an activity here. They call it a poll over in Poll Everywhere. They call it an activity here. Here's a multiple choice. I click, boom, my activity is ready to go. Again, you can use any kind of software you want to do this. Just keep these things in mind. So you ask a question, you do the segmentation. Here's the visual setting. So this is all in recorded if you want to have it. Also, I don't get any money from this or anything, but if you do want to try out Poll Everywhere, you can set up a free account. You can put in K_Kapp, and you could use it for 90 days for free. So there's already a free account, but this gives you the premium account to use for free. So feel free to use that if you want to. And here's an article about segmentation, which is also in the proceedings of the conference. So the next question I get a lot is, how do you design this instruction, right? So you've got the technology. Okay, I kind of get the technology. I get the PowerPoint. Maybe I don't know 100% how to do it, but I kind of get the concept. But I'm not sure, how do you go about developing this instruction? So one of the things I try to keep in mind is storytelling elements. And there were some really good storytelling sessions in this conference. So there's a lot of really good storytelling sessions. So you can go ahead and look at that. But here's what I try to do. First, I figure out what is the learning goal. Then what is the plot? What do you think is going to happen? And then who's going to do it? What characters are involved? So do I need to draw those characters? Can I find those characters? And then what are some key decisions? Now, you're not trying to reproduce in 100% fidelity what the conversations are. You're simply trying to set up these conversations. You're trying to set up a major hint or tip or something like that. So here are the characters that I choose. And the one thing notice is that we're going to talk about, you can move around the character. So you might have one image, but you can use that image a lot of different ways. You can do a close-up, you could do far away. So that's something that I think is helpful as well, to keep in mind that you can do different images at different times. And so with cinematic framing elements, you can actually set up like really kind of interesting things. And so what I'd like to do is talk about some framing and have you think about that as you design your PowerPoint. So here's a kind of far away perspective, close perspective. That's the same image. So by just moving an image forward or backward, you can get a sense of different things happening, even though you don't have to draw an image and draw an image and draw an image. You can use one image different ways. So one cinematic idea is the concept of a close-up, which basically shows from the character's head up, and it takes up most of the frame. And when do you use that? So I think that's important to consider that. So you use a close-up to show concern, to emphasize a point, to help reveal emotions, to zoom in on important elements. Remember how I said, let's look for a clue? We found the clue and then it kind of zoomed in on the clue. So it gave us the sense of walking up to that clue and looking at that information. So you could just show it, sure, but having the sense of moving to a close-up gives you a sense of movement that's not often available in a lot of static presentations. And so that sense of movement really kind of draws the learner in to what's happening. Then, of course, you can do long shots. These are also sometimes called established shots. That just gives you the sense of where are we? What is the environment in which this is happening? So a long shot shows the surroundings or the location of the character, but it also sets the mood. And if you'll notice in terms of mood, I purposely kept things as kind of a gray two-tone, although with sparks of color to add some interest. The real reason for that was because I wanted to reminisce or hark back to the concept of detective noir. But think about how you could use color choices and even monotone color choices like we have here to set a mood or to set a tone or to set expectations of what happens or what might happen. That can be a pretty powerful tool as well. And then here's the medium shot, which is kind of in the middle, that can show the surroundings, but I use often medium shots to show a person kind of by themselves talking to the audience or talking to a specific other character and making an important point. Like, so for example, I need you to explain to me the symptoms. I need to know what they are. So this kind of is a poignant moment, and it's just her on the screen talking to ostensibly the other character, but really to the learner, right? Okay, we need to know these symptoms, and she's looking out at us, the learner. So kind of an important thing there. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can say, well, Karl, what if I can't draw all the backgrounds and all the stuff and all that kind of stuff? So basically, you can go into free elements. Right in PowerPoint, you can download images. A lot of them are Creative Commons. And I just used an artistic effect, which was the chalkboard effect, to make this look gritty and to make it black and white. So the artistic effects in PowerPoint, if you haven't explored those yet, are pretty powerful effects. If you click on an image and it brings up format and then all kinds of artistic effects, right? I can have it super blurry. I can have kind of a neon effect. You can do all kinds of things. So explore those effects maybe even before you create your story to get a sense of, well, what kind of story do I maybe want to create? And that will give you some ideas. Like this one on the left, the neon, could be maybe futuristic. So what are your next steps? Well, one is determine appropriate learning goals. What decision making has to happen? What's the process? Ask subject matter experts for stories and for people the learner would meet during the story. And then ask them what decisions are made. And not every decision. Give me 3 or 4 really key important decisions. Then storyboard out the scenes, start putting it into PowerPoint, layer it, and practice. Now, I've been doing this presentation for since like 2004 in various iterations. So what you're seeing is a final product that's been honed for quite some time. Yours might not look like that right away, but in just a little bit of time, yours will look very polished will look very focused on what your learners are looking for, and will help get your learning message across in an interactive, engaging fashion. So I believe we're just about out of time. So let me open it up for questions to see if anybody has any questions that I might be able to answer.
We have some questions, Karl. So we have
Great.
a question from Nicole. Nicole has said, how do you add competition when it's asynchronous other than leaderboards? That's a challenge that she has.
Right. That's a great question. So one of the things that I've done when it's asynchronous is I have asked questions and then said, if you've ever seen this show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And they go, survey says, and then they give an answer. So what I'll do is I'll have answers of what most people will answer or what I think is a standard answer, and said, okay, you're competing against the computer, or you're competing against other people who have answered this question in the past. Let's see how you do compared to them. So while it's not a real competition because the real people aren't there competing, you can say, hey, let's see if the 10 people got this question right last time. Let's see how you're doing. Or out of 100 people, this many people get this question right. What's your answer? Or here's what people have answered previously. Maybe you can get that from your pilot and see how you've done. Or you could just say, okay, the other thing you could do to add competition or add something like a sense of urgency is have a timer. So you can say, hey, you have 30 seconds to answer this particular question. The average time it takes to answer this question is 15 seconds, right? And so you give that sense of, oh, okay, I got to have a little bit of urgency. I got to do something, have these other people. Now, if you have additional funds and resources, there's a number of tools. There's a game called You Don't Know Jack. And what they do is you can play that game by yourself or with a colleague, but what they do is they record the colleague's answers and time. And so when you play and you choose that colleague, it's not happening in real time. You're playing against a recorded version of what they answered before, which I think that's kind of an interesting way to do that as well. So those are a few ideas depending on where you fit in the budgetary constraints.
Really cool, Karl. Getting some really great feedback in the chat on that. So thanks for sharing.
Oh, fantastic.
I also have a question from Karen. So she said, if there is a poll everywhere embedded in the PowerPoint, does this mean that you can't use it offline?
No, you can use it both places. So, unless, so the poll everywhere works on a website. Okay, I get it. Correct. If the poll everywhere needs web access. So if you don't have the web, and you don't have an internet, if you don't have an internet, you can't use poll everywhere.
Okay, great.
So and if you don't have poll everywhere and you don't have any kind of that software, you could use the polls in Zoom. They're just not quite as integrated, but they have the question and they have the thought, and so you perfectly can do that, or you can even ask something in the chat. So it's not dependent on the technology.
We have another question from Kim. She has asked, how have you found leaderboards impacts the culture of teams?
Good question. So I always say leaderboards work really, really well for the first 10 people. The 11th person is like, and the 100th person is actually demotivated. So team-based leaderboards work better than individual leaderboards, because even if I can't be at the top of the leaderboard, I don't want to let my team down. So team-based leaderboards are a much better tool for camaraderie and collaboration, and actually for contribution, than an individual leaderboard, because the same 10 people are typically at the top of every individual leaderboard. But if you create teams, then you have more incentive to actually contribute and be part of it. So I would say if you could do team-based leaderboards. The other leaderboards that can be effective are past leaderboards, and what I mean by that is your past performance against your present performance. So you're actually comparing yourself to somebody, to yourself, but it was yourself 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. So that can be helpful as well.
Great. So we've got 2 minutes left, Karl. So I'll just ask one more question.
Sure.
A question from Nirad. He has asked, how can we combine job aids and gamification?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things I think that you might want to think about if you're combining job aids and gamification is maybe the awarding of badges for properly using the job aid. One of the things that I find with job aids is that they're out there, but people tend not to use them as much as maybe we would want them to use them, or we would actually expect them to use them. People get busy, things happen. I get it. So what we've done in a couple of cases is it depends on your organization, but we've actually barcoded or QR coded the last step in the job aid. And if you follow the job aid, then it tells you, hey, take this barcode or take this QR code to such and such and scan it, and you'll earn points. And we actually had an increase in people using the actual job aid. And one of the other things was they had to show that they actually used it for the job. So as we correlated, oh, here's the job, they did the right steps, and then they scanned the job aid. Like you couldn't scan it 100 times to get points, right? So it was integrated into the flow that they were doing. But I think what you really need to think about, and sometimes we've also did badges. So if you learn the knowledge of the job aid, then you and can demonstrate that, then you get a badge, you get the job aid badge. So you can do those different kind of ways as well. One thing I would look at is why are people not using the job aid? And is gamification the right leverage to get them to use the job aid? So sometimes somebody wants gamification, but we look at the job aid and say, well, this is really confusing job aid. No wonder nobody's using it because it's hard to follow, right? Was it written by the engineers? And the engineers understood it, but the people that had to do, the actual work on the manufacturing floor couldn't understand it. So the very first step is not to jump to gamifying job aids right away, but look at the job aid, find out why people aren't using it. If they're not motivated and it's easy to use and it's simple and they don't see, then a gamification might be a good tool in that situation. So kind of a long-winded answer.
Thank you so much, Karl. That session was absolutely incredible. It's amazing that you can create something so interactive in PowerPoint, and we're all very grateful to have had you here. So thank you so much for coming to the Learning Conference. And
thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Get set for the next session.
Bye.